Welcome to this explainer. If you've been scrolling through your feed anytime recently, you've almost certainly seen the headlines or the panicked posts. We're talking about the red heifer prophecy. I know, it sounds like something straight out of an ancient myth, but it's actually shaping massive real-world conversations right now. Today, we're going to objectively unpack the deep historical and theological roots behind this massive viral internet panic. We're going to break down exactly what this is, where it comes from, and what it supposedly means for the future of the world. So here's our roadmap for today. Number 1, the red heifer prophecy. Number 2, origins of the sacrifice. 3, the temples of Jerusalem. 4, the quest for purification. And finally, number 5, signs of the end times. All right, let's jump right in. Section 1, the red heifer prophecy. We're kicking off our detective story right here in the modern day, looking at a highly unusual event from September 2022 that completely set the internet on fire. Back in September 2022, a very specific number emerged in the news: 5. 5 perfectly red heifers were flown all the way from America to Israel. Now, you have to understand, this wasn't just some random agricultural import. For certain Jewish groups, this arrival marked the potential end of a grueling 2,000-year-long search for an incredibly rare, incredibly specific type of animal. And man, did the internet react. The arrival of these 5 cows triggered an absolute meltdown online. Social media was flooded with panic, with people outright claiming that their arrival meant, and I quote, "Dajjal and doomsday are about to come." It literally sounded alarms for the end of the world. But instead of feeding into all that fear, we're going to take a step back and calmly analyze the true anatomy and origin of this belief, strictly based on the historical texts. Section 2, origins of the sacrifice. To truly wrap our heads around why a red cow holds such monumental importance, we have to act like a time machine and travel back 3,300 years to the desert era of Moses, or Hazrat Musa alayhis salam, right after he freed his people from the Pharaoh in Egypt. Okay, so here's the story. When Moses went up to Mount Sinai for 40 days to receive the Torah, a really tragic turning point happened back at camp. His followers collected and melted down their gold, shaping it into a cow statue. According to the texts, mud from the footprint of Jibril was actually placed into it, which caused this golden calf to emit these strange sounds. The people, well, they totally believed God had come to them, and they ended up worshiping the statue for those 40 days. When Moses finally returned, he was incredibly angry and strictly forbade this idol worship. But the problem was, the reverence and love for the cow had already settled way deep in their hearts. So to permanently eradicate this lingering love for the cow, God commanded a very specific divine sacrifice when a mysterious crime occurred in the community. You see, someone had been killed, and nobody knew who the murderer was. The people went to Moses for answers, and God commanded that a cow be sacrificed and a piece of its flesh be placed directly on the dead body. Miraculously, this act revived the murdered man just long enough for him to name his killer. Now, here is the absolutely crucial point. When given this command, the Israelites started overthinking it. They began asking hesitant question after hesitant question about exactly what kind of cow was needed. And because they asked so many questions, the resulting criteria handed down by God became incredibly strict. I mean, we're talking zero margin for error. The cow had to be completely red, not a single hair of any other color on its entire body. It had to be at least 3 years old, physically flawless, and it could never ever have been put to work. By overcomplicating what started as a relatively straightforward task, they inadvertently made finding this specific cow exceedingly rare and wildly expensive. Section 3, the temples of Jerusalem. Fast forward from the desert, how on earth does this incredibly rare ancient sacrifice connect to the holy city of Jerusalem today? Let's trace the historical timeline really quick. We jump from Moses to the era where a young boy named David defeated the powerful Ami king Jalud, an event marked in some source texts around the year 1755 BC. David goes on to create an empire, and his son, Solomon, builds a grand first temple in Jerusalem. This was the hub where the Israelites worshipped and performed these exact purification rituals. But then, centuries pass, and the Roman Empire rises to absolute power. Around 2,000 years ago, Emperor Titus violently persecuted the Jewish people and completely burned that very temple to the ground. Section 4, the quest for purification. Following that fiery destruction by the Romans, we enter a massive 2-millennia-long waiting period. For 2,000 years, the Jewish people could not rebuild their temple. And this entire era is defined by a desperate quest for religious purification. To understand why they couldn't just rebuild, we have to look at the concept of impurity. In Jewish tradition, touching a dead body causes a profound state of spiritual impurity. And because of the way this impurity spreads from person to person over thousands of years, almost all believers are considered impure today. It's like a giant invisible chain reaction. In this state, they are strictly forbidden from worshiping properly or rebuilding their holy temple. They are essentially stuck, just waiting for a cure. And you guessed it, this is exactly where those 5 red cows from 2022 come into play. To break this 2,000-year cycle of impurity, this exact 4-step process is required. You must sacrifice a flawless red heifer, burn its body entirely, mix those ashes with water, and finally, use that water to cleanse the believers. Historically speaking, this precise purification was last performed all the way back by Moses and Aaron. Only once they are purified by these specific ashes can they achieve their ultimate objective. And that objective? Constructing the 3rd and final temple on the historic Temple Mount. Make no mistake, it is the construction of this specific temple that acts as the grand catalyst for all of the end times prophecies that currently have the internet in an absolute frenzy. Section 5, Signs of the End Times. The building of this temple triggers massive, world-altering theological predictions. But what's truly fascinating here is how these predictions differ drastically depending on which faith you are looking at. We really need to contrast these perspectives neutrally because a stark divide emerges. On one hand, Jewish tradition holds that the new temple will bring their true prophesied Messiah. But on the other hand, Islamic tradition views this entirely differently. According to Islamic texts, this figure arriving at the temple is actually the false Messiah, the Dajjal. So in the Islamic tradition, believers are instead awaiting the return of Isa al-Salam and Imam Mahdi to counter this Dajjal. Let's dig into that Islamic hadith for a second. It says that when Imam Mahdi arrives, Muslims will be called from Mashraq to help him. An army bearing black flags will march to conquer Jerusalem and fight the Dajjal. But if we think about this critically, there is a fascinating logistical problem with this prophecy playing out in our modern 21st century world. I mean, how does a traditional army fight today? The source material makes a really profound point here. This is the era of chemical way, press the button and the work is done. Today's warfare is all about advanced technology, airstrikes, drones, and push-button destruction. However, a true righteous ground war, exactly as described in the ancient prophecies, requires equal footing, sword for sword, army against army. The text points out that if the legendary Islamic commander Khalid bin Walid fought today, he wouldn't bring a sword to a pistol fight, right? He would learn to make a pistol, because true war requires equal power. Since the ancient prophecies explicitly describe traditional armies in ground combat reminiscent of the days of Khalid bin Walid, it leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative thought. Will fulfilling these ancient prophecies actually require the total erasure of modern technology? Think about it. If the Dajjal and Imam Mahdi are to face off with traditional ground armies, does that mean our current era of push-button technology has to completely collapse first? It's a staggering concept to wrap your head around, and it completely reframes how we look at an ancient prophecy involving 5 red cows in the modern age. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you in the next one.